everyone. I'm Elizabeth Evans Ciccone, a long-time member of TESOL Italy, and I'd like to welcome you to this session of TESOL Italy's 47th convention, Promoting Hope in ERT. Our speaker for this session is Julie Wallace. Julie is director of the London School with 35 years experience in teaching and training, covering a number of external roles. President of AISLE, having previously worked in education and events organizer, as a member of the board of ECLOS, a trustee and an inspector. The title of Julie's session is Fostering a Humanistic Approach to Online, Blended and Hybrid Classrooms. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. So I'd like to start by saying the reason that I've suggested this talk is because of my background in observing other teachers and lately observing a lot of people online. And it seems to me that what I'm observing is quite often not good practice. And that's possibly because people aren't thinking of what good practice is in a virtual classroom, but also in the classroom. So let me talk a little bit about the changes in my classroom over the last 2 years. And as soon as I do that, I can't. So this is an example of one of my classes. It's actually an exam prep course. Some of you may be horrified, but I think you'll agree that everyone in this classroom is totally engaged. They're learning. I love the mess of learning, but this was a physical classroom. And this was just before, of course, lockdown. And suddenly, I think we were actually the first private school in the whole of Italy, and even before state schools, that went into lockdown on the 23rd of February 2020. So this is what my classroom then suddenly looked like. And it was very, very different. But it was still possible. I just had to rethink some of the activities I'd planned to do with my learners. And then, horror of horrors, we realized that COVID wasn't going to leave us. And we had the situation where we had to find a way of including our learners who were at home in our classroom. In our school, we made the decision not to put learners from home on the front board because we wanted them to feel, and the other members in the classroom to feel, that they were still a part of our class. So we actually used, as you can see, a TV screen and placed the learner with other learners, and we had laptops that could be moved around so we could continue with group work. And this was actually, I have to say that in our school, the teachers were not as resistant to online learning. And that's partly because we invested in a lot of training as they were to going into hybrid. And hybrid, we have to accept, is here to stay, even if it's not in the state education at the moment. We want to make sure that all our learners have opportunities of learning. So we do not want to say you can't come to school just because you're at home, even if you are positive, but you have no symptoms and you'd like to join. We want to be able to include everyone. And then, horror of horrors, of course, had to happen. I got COVID. And that meant that I couldn't go to school. But I was fine. I was without any symptoms whatsoever. And I didn't want to lose my lesson. And I had to rethink completely. And I joined the class online. This is in a state school where I was a language assistant. And you can just see at the back the teacher of the class. And I really had to think about how I would set up activities, and above all, how I could monitor the activities. It was quite hard to hear what was going on in the classroom, but I could see what was going on, and I could get students to present feedback after the activities. But I had to learn to let go, and I'll come back to that later. So those are 4 completely different situations that we've been through over the last 2 years. And I don't think things are going to change much in the coming couple of years. So this is me. This is where I'm coming from. I'm a teacher. I know everybody says, I'm a teacher, but I love being in the classroom. I'm not in the classroom as often as I would like, because I have so many other roles at the moment. But when I am in the classroom, I absolutely love it. So I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher trainer. I'm the director of my own school, and the school is a part of Equals and a part of Isley, so we're regularly inspected, and all the teachers, including myself, are observed in order to ensure we meet the standards. I'm an observer in my own school, but because I'm also an inspector for Isley and for Equals, I get the privilege and the opportunity of visiting schools around the world and looking at them under the microscope and watching teachers in different classrooms, in different contexts, with different levels, and students from different backgrounds, and not only English teachers, teachers of all languages. And that's quite exciting, but it can also sometimes be a little bit, oh no, not again. But generally, it's very exciting. I'm also responsible for quality control in our own school, so it's important that I check that we do meet the standards. And they're the standards I'm looking for as an inspector too. In the classroom, the materials, the resources, and so on. Above all, probably, I'm a learner. I'm constantly learning, constantly reflecting, constantly thinking, and constantly ready to improve. And that's where I'm coming from when I look at this, what we're going to be talking about. And finally, I've become involved in an Erasmus project. I'm one of 5 partners, and it's called HLT Digital. And it all started with Mario Involucri, who asked us to take his documentation and digitalize it. The aim of the project is to profile humanistic practitioners from different sectors. People like Rod Belitho and Alan Maley are well known to you all, but people like Tom Kiddle from Nile, who focuses on assessment, or people from other sectors, management, directors of studies, and so on. And the more I got into the project, the more it made me reflect on my own practices and what I really would like to see happening in a classroom, whether it's online, face-to-face, blended, synchronous or asynchronous. And I really want that to be clear. I'm not saying it's one thing for one and it's one thing for another. So what is humanistic language teaching? Well, the father of humanistic language teaching was Maslow. Abraham Maslow introduced his hierarchy of needs. Now, I think it's worth looking at that again because, we look at physiological needs, air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing. Mostly in Italy, our students have this. If you're only teaching in Italy. But if you're online, you may be teaching students that are in war-torn countries, or you may be teaching students currently that come from other countries such as the Ukraine, which is what we've been doing in our school. So actually, physiological needs and safety needs become really important. We have to go back and think about them again and check that our learners are okay before we start the lesson, because they're not going to get to that blue line at the top unless this is in place. And another thing I think is so important, this love and belonging, it sounds a bit wishy-washy and hippie, but actually making a connection with people online and in the classroom is important. People want to feel valued. Teachers want to feel valued, but so do learners. Even a smile helps. Even a smile helps. But, you know, just checking, is everything okay when they come into the classroom? Does anyone have anything to share? Just checking this and making sure that we recognize and respect the learners in our classroom. And when we've done all that, the learning can begin. And I really don't believe it can begin before that. Now, if you're in a class with 22, 30 students, that's a big ask of a teacher. So I do recognize that the job of a teacher, a good teacher, I'm not going to say expert, I don't like the word expert because I think we all always have something to learn, but the job of a good teacher is actually a very difficult one because we need eyes and ears all over us, not just in the back of our head. So humanistic factors, according to Carl Rogers, who was a human psychologist, he was in agreement with Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, but he believed that personal growth was dependent on the context, the environment, and that we needed to provide this sense of acceptance and safety and build on empathy. And it can't be undervalued. The building of empathy can't be undervalued. So if you have a class of 30 and you're saying, student A, read line 1, student B, read line 2, we have a problem. That's not building empathy, because while you're doing that, 28 other students are not engaged. And if they're not engaged, you can't possibly be building empathy. So online, perhaps we need to think about how we want to do the things that we'd like to do and how we can help and guide our learners to success. We need to make them feel safe. Mistakes are wonderful. Please make mistakes. My students go, what? We're not allowed to make mistakes at school. Please make mistakes, because if you're not making mistakes, you're in the wrong class. You know, we need you to learn. So making them feel that that's great and not jumping on them for every mistake they make. Delayed feedback, delayed error correction, which I see so often happen in a real live classroom, is just as important online. Making notes of what you hear, and then at a certain point coming back to your learners and saying, hey, I heard you say this and I heard you say that. Which of the two are correct? Why? How could you make it better? What would you say? Asking questions and keeping people involved. Pop into breakout rooms and work together. And giving people a choice of the way we're going forward. What do we need? These are my agreed objectives. We agree them. We understand why we want to achieve these things today before we start. And don't forget that factors affecting learning are not just based on what the learner needs or the learner wants. Factors affecting learning come from the teacher and the learner. If the teacher's anxious, it shows, and it will affect the learner. If the learner's anxious, it will affect the teacher. Anxiety does have that effect, so deal with it before you continue. Self-esteem, oh, so many kids having problems these last couple of years. One of the courses I taught online with 13-year-olds who said they wouldn't speak in Italian because they didn't want to look stupid, but eventually they did. They asked if they could stay online. And they'd stayed online for up to an hour after the lesson had finished. it was wonderful to hear them. They were 12, 13-year-olds. And I asked them why they wanted to stay online. And they said, because nobody listens to us anymore. Isn't that sad? You know, we teachers think, oh, these kids, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. But we were able to learn from our friends at school. We were in contact with them. We were playing with them. These kids have spent, many of them, nearly a year inside, and we've all seen the results. Anxiety attacks in the classroom, people unable to relate, fights breaking out where perhaps they didn't break out before because they're still trying to understand how to relate to each other, let alone how to relate to the teacher. And the language they choose will also be affected by how they feel. Egos, I'm not saying they need a big ego, on the contrary, but I do think that's connected to self-esteem. They need to feel comfortable in the classroom, and empathy, empathy, empathy. We need to be seeing learners as individuals. I can't see anybody here today, unfortunately, so I can't see you as an individual, but I presume you're there somewhere listening to me. But I think it's very important when I said at the beginning, eyes and ears everywhere, that happens online too. It's very, very important. And we talk about teacher-centered learning. We often talk about teacher-centered learning as being a bad thing because it's too much teacher talking time, like me right now. So we saw this shift into people believing that learner-centered learning was more important. But I don't believe that teacher-centered activities are necessarily wrong, or that learner-centered activities are necessarily wrong. Yes, of course, I believe there should be plenty of opportunities for learners to practice and speak and listen. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there are activities. I saw one yesterday in Isley's Training for Excellence, where there was a dictation happening through mime, and the other people had to write down the story. It was wonderful, but it was the teacher doing the mime, the learners writing. Now, what I'm trying to get to is learning-centered, and what I mean by this is noticing, eyes and ears, noticing what's happening in the classroom, noticing that Elizabeth is nodding in agreement, but perhaps the TESOL assistenta is not and is shaking her head. Noticing this, noticing if there's a puzzled look, Elizabeth, please, on the, yeah, oh, I need to go and attend to Elizabeth now. Now, online, I have the most amazing opportunity that I don't have in a live classroom. I can go to Elizabeth and say, right, I'm putting people in breakout rooms. Elizabeth, I'm going to join you. Now, I noticed, Elizabeth, you had a puzzled expression. Is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything you'd like to ask me about? I can give individual feedback online, either by joining somebody in a breakout room, but I can also give feedback in chat, which is private. And I can also give feedback to the group or to groups in breakout rooms, or I can give chat feedback to the group. That's something I can't do in a classroom. So many people say, oh, yes, but online. No, let's get back to normal. Well, normal is now. Normal is what we are doing right now, right this minute. And who, let's be honest, doesn't find it a lot easier to join us online than to have to travel to Rome, find a hotel, by the way, the prices have doubled, just to join TESOL. You know, this is normal now. It's not going to change. So let's make normal great. Let's make the experience of normal for both ourselves and our learners something special. So keeping your eyes and ears open, noticing who needs support, changing pairs, moving people into different breakout rooms, giving the support they need, and not rubber stamping. Anybody who knows about Jim Scrivener and Adrian Underhill's idea of demand high will understand that. It means not saying, yes, good, well done. It's not useful to anybody. If I come and observe a lesson of yours and I say, great lesson, it doesn't tell you anything. What you need is, you did this well because you did this. Why did you do this? How did you get to your objectives? Have you considered this? So good feedback is the same for teachers as it is for learners. And I think that shouldn't be forgotten, online or in the classroom. And remember that context is very, very important. You can see lots of context in this picture. It's a bit overcrowded, I apologize. But you can see our teachers during lockdown, or when we were allowed to finally come back, looking at how to include people with learning differences on the top right. And you can see people from Equals joining conferences. You can see kids out walking. They're different contexts, but they are learning contexts. And just if you wondered what those false teeth are doing down at the bottom, that was an amazing, intensive course. Well, we did about 12 weeks of courses teaching teachers in Tunisia to teach primary classes. And then they gave us examples of how to brush your teeth and so on. So, you know, all of these things are great. And the other thing I really want to remind people, now that I think about that course, you know, when we talk about homes, describe your favorite room, draw online, we don't need to do that. I could get up now and show you around my school and tell you what I like best, or introduce you to somebody. There's an opportunity in online learning that just isn't there in the classroom. There are other opportunities in the live classroom. I don't deny it, but it's the context. Look at the context. Who are your learners? Where are they learning from? How often do you see these days, even in consigli di classe, you can see the teacher who's actually out walking and is joining from their mobile phone. Again, we couldn't have done that 3 years ago. Is it so bad? I don't think so. So think about context, and then once you've understood the context and prepared your lessons, get ready to go. So, good teaching techniques in an online context. I wonder how many of these are any different to good teaching techniques in a live classroom. Sharing and agreeing goals with your learners, coming back to them at the end and reflecting on whether they've been met. Being flexible because something happens. You may have your plan, but somebody's just said something that's created a learning opportunity. Going off track, keeping your eye on the clock. Well, of course, if you want to achieve your objectives within a given time, you do need to keep your eye on the clock, but be flexible. ICQs, checking that people understand instructions, so important online and so important in the classroom. One thing that you can do online, of course, is you can write your instructions and students can copy them, but you can also say them, you can still check them. And CCQs, your concept check questions. Effective monitoring. I have reams of books of notes where I've listened to teachers or to students speaking, and I've written down what they've said. And then I've picked out the ones I think are most important for that lesson or that session, put them on the board and said, okay, what's right, what's wrong, work together, decide why. Tessa Woodward always calls it the language waitress. I'm your language waitress, and I'm going to serve back to you what you leave on your plates. And she comes back and she gets the learners to think of other ways of saying things. And she shares what she hears from one group to another. Now you can do that online. That's great. So effective monitoring is something that I really think is important. And being aware, ready to react and take advantage of opportunities and giving useful, timely feedback. That means that if somebody's speaking, not interrupting them and saying, no, you can't say that, or, well, we would say this. Lots of eliciting if you need to, but thinking about when you're going to give the feedback, especially if you're popping into breakout rooms online where people are talking in pairs, but in the classroom, it's the same. I always say to our teachers, don't even look at your students when you're monitoring, because otherwise they'll latch onto you. Write down what they say and pick or choose your times, even plan the times when you're going to give the feedback. And know your tools, of course. If you're using Zoom or Kumo Space, you may not know Kumo Space. It's more of a conferencing tool, but actually can be great for learning because you can choose your settings. Back to context again, you can choose to go to a beach, for example, or into a big hotel or sit round open fires. So it's entirely up to you to choose your setting. Teams, Google Meet, which of course improved during lockdown, Google Meet. We couldn't put people easily into breakout rooms, but it's better and better. Keep it user-friendly though. It has to be something, a tool that the learners can use. Now, one way you can deal with that is simply making a video using your tool and sending it to your learners on how to use what you're using, or to create PDFs. And there are lots of ideas on other digital tools that you can find at Nick Peachy's website here, peachypublications.com. And he's got lots of lovely ideas to use online too. A teacher said this to me, and I thought she's absolutely right. It doesn't need to be fancy, but it needs to be engaging. And I so agree with that. You know, I've taught blended learning courses at Bell, at Pilgrims. I love tech, but I hate seeing tech used in the wrong way or in a way that just doesn't make sense. I see so many teachers using Kahoot. I ask them why, and they say, oh, well, I'm teaching them to use present perfect simple. No, you're not. You're testing them. And you're not even testing whether or not they know how to use it. What you're testing is to see who is the quickest at using their mobile phone. And you've totally forgotten all the other learners that don't win. So you're not learning from Kahoot. I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm saying use it wisely. Use it for fun. If you can be honest, it's a fun quiz. I'm checking to see what they learn. Fine. But really think about what you're doing. It doesn't have to be fancy. Choose 2 or 3 tools that you use again and again that students can get used to. And by the way, really, Kahoot, teachers, what a waste of your time. Why don't you give the Kahoots to the students to write, to test each other? That's where the learning is going to take place. The same with Mentimeter and other ideas. Get the students doing it. We're here to help them learn and be successful. So let's focus on the learning outcomes and not on what we intend to teach or how. It doesn't need to be fancy. It needs to be engaging, and they need to be learning. So yes, there are loads of tools. Here are just a few, of course. Mentimeter, Kahoot. Zoom screencasting with Zoom is so useful. Your students could be making little presentations using Zoom, speaking, sending them to you. You can be assessing their speaking, or even better, they can be working on little projects and present them to each other using Zoom. There's so much you can do. You don't have to be the wizard of technology. You need to be able to use a few good tools that your students can use. There's EdApp, if you want to make quizzes, if you want them to make quizzes, Edpuzzle, if you want to use video material and set homework tasks or project tasks. If you really want some help doing exam questions, they can go on here, but they don't have to do it in the classroom time. Typeform is another kind of survey. Again, they can create their own surveys, but you can also find out how they're doing, what they need, how they feel in the classroom using Typeform. You can also set up little portfolios for them and get them to assess their own learning. Quizlet, PowerPoint, they're all there. They're not difficult. Don't choose them all. Just choose what counts. And you know, setting up those tasks is so important in the classroom and in a virtual classroom. And of course, if you've got a hybrid classroom, you really need to think carefully about it. But then you need to be ready to let go. There aren't many teachers willing to let go, I've noticed. That means you set up, you give them the task, you make sure they understand the task, you make sure you understand what's expected of them. And once you've made sure, and you need to take time over that, let them do it, let them get on with it. That's the mess of learning. Adrian Underhill calls it the mess of learning. And I love to see those moments in the classroom where things are changing. What a wonderful lesson this was. What a terrifying lesson this was for me to join from afar. 4 in a row, but it was absolutely great because it worked. It made me think, and the kids loved it too. And I didn't have to miss my lesson after all. So be ready to let go a bit. You don't have to be bombing around all of those breakout rooms when they're working on a task, so long as you know how you're going to get the feedback and you are able to take some notes. That's all you need to be doing. The learners will do the learning. Are you indicating 5 minutes, Elizabeth, or am I okay? 5. So ask yourself before and after 10 observations. So that means before you teach, and you can observe yourself, by the way, you could be recording your lesson, videoing, or simply recording on your mobile phone. Why are you going to do this? Or will you do this? Why are you doing this activity? What are you going to achieve by it? And how are you going to achieve it? And how will you know you achieved it? And ask yourself, do I need to be doing it like this? Is there another way? Ask a colleague, get feedback. Ask the learners if there was another way at the end of the lesson. But think about what you're doing. If you want to develop as a teacher, and I'm sure you do because you want your learners to develop as learners, and we teachers are learners too, then these are the kinds of questions you should be asking yourself before you get into the classroom and after. And assessment, oh my God, assessment. This is a whole other talk, but I can't leave today without touching on it. Rob Belitho said, assessment and testing is not humanistic. And I said, well, what about if the students know what the learning objectives are, and based on that, they write a rubric? If you've never seen a rubric, you can look at rubrics on the exam board's websites or in some of the handbooks for teachers and examiners, but you can also find lots online. Here's just one. It's a thermometer student rubric. But you can even do it with tiny children. You can do them in the form of puzzles or trees, make it fun. But they know what they need to learn, and they know how to get, by writing that rubric, from one part to another. Now, if they're low level of English or whatever language you're teaching, it doesn't have to be in the second language. It could be in the first language. But if you've got this, you as a teacher will be using this to assess, and they can assess themselves, they can assess their peers, but they can see how to do better. We so often forget that when we're at university or we're studying for a master's or anything else like that, we get an opportunity to reproduce something. Let's say I write an assignment for a master's degree. I get feedback on it, and then I do it again. So the other thing I would say is assessment should still be about the learners and the learning. So please, please give your learners a second chance to do something. Let them make you a little video talking about their home or their pets or what they're going to be doing next weekend, and then give them feedback and ask them to do it again. That's the one you're assessing, because in between those two, that's where the learning took place. And if you want to, you can introduce Bloom's taxonomy. There are so many wonderful verbs to use, but taking things from the point of remembering, testing whether somebody remembers when Van Gogh was born, up to creating something. Maybe you can create a Van Gogh-like picture on your own. You know, this is where we want our students to be. We want them up in the top. We want them using their cognitive skills, analysing language, evaluating themselves, creating something new, projects. That's where we want our students to be. So remember that, because quite often I see people testing, remembering. We don't even get to the understanding. And finally, here are some of the books I would recommend. One I only really learnt about by doing this humanistic language teaching project, and that was Caring and Sharing in the Foreign Language Classroom, which I managed to track down, a beautiful old secondhand copy. I do want to say that somebody I know well, who I have to say I rely on as a mentor, and another writer, a humanistic writer, said to me, I call it the long moan. But I should also say that other people we've been interviewing for our project, people like Jeremy Harmer and Adrian Underhill, have said that for them, that book was a turning point in their teaching career. And if you want to know more, you can either contact the Secretariat and Isley, or you can contact me directly. I'm always willing to share and talk about what I'm doing and what I'm learning. And I'm happy to let you know about how our humanistic language teaching project is going, and let you know when the website for that will be published, where you'll be able to see videos, profiles, and many other things. And a lot of Maria Involucre's papers digitalized. And finally, I'd like to say thank you. There I am, working from home in my kitchen, just for an extra cultural activity. And we painted eggs for Easter. So I wanted you to also realize that, you know, teaching online, it can be so exciting. So I know I'm just about there, and I'm going to finish by saying that one of the things I did in lockdown was I taught my colleagues and friends around Europe to cook Italian food online. I'd never considered that that would be possible before. And the other thing I did was I learned to do macrame, which I did when the kids were in breakout rooms. I sat there working away, listening to them, watching, making notes. You know, we can learn so much all the time. There's something to learn. But I'd say don't resist online learning. Make it your space and make it important, and make it as important as a live classroom. And with that, I'll say thank you And if there are any questions, and if I have any time, I'm happy to take them. I can't hear you, Elizabeth, you're muted.
Sorry. Really enjoyed your talk. Very inspiring. Wonderful. Useful session. True,
Yeah,
we're
not
always
quite.
learning, from Vanessa. Hi,
Thank
Vanessa.
you, Vanessa.
Yeah. Don't seem to be any questions at the moment. That's super. Super lovely. And so if I want some information about Aisley, I'll just contact you.
It's Isley, AI.
Sorry.
But everybody
Isley.
English says Aisley because it makes sense, doesn't it? It's
Yes.
Isley.
Okay.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
everybody. But
everyone's
do ask
thanking you.
questions.
Fabulous. Wonderful. Great. So
I've been giving quite a lot of talks on different things, and I gave one. I'm sure you know that Isley's been doing a training for excellence session every month. I think you're giving one, aren't you? I can't remember.
No.
Yeah, next year.
Maybe next year, yes. That'd be good.
But I gave a session just on assessment because I think, you know, we teachers were thrown into assessment, but very few of us have been trained to assess. Very, very few of us.
That's true.
And even if we're, you know, examining or speaking examiners, we rarely get help assessing writing or reading. And I think quite often teachers can't separate the idea of what the test is and what the learning is. You know, if you open nearly every single book that we get these days, you go into a course book and the reading is always read the text and answer the questions.
Yes.
Wow, it's testing. You're testing.
Is.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it is testing.
Of course. Instead, it's great to read it together and discuss with the students, obviously. Absolutely. And then think of other ways of finding out if they fully understood rather than just questions. We rarely have time to assess our teaching after classes, unfortunately, says Fabio.
Fabio, one way is simply to look back at what you did. Just take time and think about it. I can see you say it's important. I mean, in our school, we observe our teachers regularly and we look at a lesson plan once every 2 weeks, a full formal lesson plan. We don't do it every lesson because that would be excruciatingly painful for teachers, but we talk through it and we look at, you know, I've seen in various contexts, teachers writing objective, past simple. That's not an objective.
No. It's so important to reflect on after you've done your lesson, reflect on what you feel was good about it or what wasn't so good, and it really helps for future lessons, absolutely.
Absolutely. And think about what you want the learner to be able to do by the end of the lesson. And it can't be use past simple.
No.
It could be talk about things that didn't happen in the past. So you've got negative things, or talk about what they did the day before. Fine. And then at the end, did you achieve that? Did they achieve it? And they don't have to be perfect, but did you get there?
Absolutely. Very wise.
Thank you.
Wise words. Thank you so much. So on behalf of TESOL Italy, we'd like to thank you very much, Julie, for your inspiring talk. Thank you
very much.
And thank you everyone who joined us, and see you later, probably. Bye, everyone.
Bye. See you in August.
Yeah, definitely. See you next summer. Yeah, next August. Absolutely.
Thanks.
And thank you. I don't know if that's someone, no, they're just, everyone's just saying bye.
Goodbye,
so,
goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, Julie. Lovely to see you again.
Bye.
See you around. Bye.
You said that the road to happiness was long and winding. You said that the forest would get dark, and that the ground could shift here upon this hill we're climbing. No matter how close we get, we're still so far. But I trust we'll find the clearing. I'm trusting the trail. No matter what we're feeling, there's one way we can't fail. Let's just keep hiking. Let's plant our feet. Let's just keep hiking. Keep hiking with me. Hold my hand, baby. Keep hiking with me. You said the road up to success was an impossible test unless we had some sort of map. And I could feel it in my chest just as our feet begged us to rest. I think this just might be the end of that. But I said I trust we'll find the clearing. I'm trusting the trail. No matter what we're feeling, there's one way we can't fail. Let's just keep hiking. Let's plant our feet. Let's just keep hiking. Keep hiking with me. Hold my hand.